Okay, Pasuk Vov, Parshas Bechukosai. Nosati shalom b'aretz. I will place peace in the land. It doesn't say there will be peace. The Nosati shalom. Interesting expression. I will make peace in the land. It's not just it's going to happen. The Nosati. You know, we say the last bracha of the Shemona Esrei, we say Sim Shalom. Right? God puts peace. Same type of expression. Sim Shalom Uvrocha. We ask God to put in place Shalom. Hashem says, V'nosati Shalom. As God says in the beginning of Bechukosai, when this bracha is God puts peace. What gives peace, we say in the Shemona Esrei, we're asking Hashem, Sim Shalom. You should put peace. Sim is place, V'nosati is give. Give peace, place peace. Same concept. Ushchavte ve'machrid. And you lie and sleep, a machrid, there's nothing to tremble. There's nothing to be concerned. Meaning you'll be able to sleep without worry. Because when God puts peace in the land, there's nothing to worry about. Vishpati chayro minoretz. I will remove all predator animals from the land. One does not be concerned that he'll be mauled or his flocks or herds will be destroyed through predator animals. The cherev lo savro barzachem. And the sword will not pass through your land. We'll see. Let's see Rashi. When Nasati Shalom, Shemetonu Harimachol Vamishter. We've already spoken. God says that if you follow my statutes, the rains will come in that time. The bounty will be beyond any level of belief that each season will overlap the other. That'll be the degree of bounty. Im ein shalom in klum. If there is no peace, there's nothing. Talmud lo ma'acha kol zos l'sati shalom boretz. You say you could have everything. If a person doesn't have peace, what do you have? People have fortunes, but if it could be plundered, what's its value? You're always worried it could be plundered. There's no peace. Talmud loma achazev v'nosati shalom boretz. God says no. When I give you all this bounty and all this wealth, there will be peace in the land. I will guarantee peace in the land. Bikan sha'asholom shokol keneged hakol. Meaning it's understandable that without peace, whatever you have doesn't mean very much. But what the Torah is telling us, Nasati Shalom Boretz, that if you're in peace, peace is the equivalent of having everything. Let's say you don't have what to eat. We have very, very little to eat. But if a person feels secure because he has peace, that's the equivalent of having everything. If you could get by and you live in peace and you guarantee peace, it's worth everything in the world. Chenu Omer. Osa Shalom Ubori is Hakol. God makes peace and he creates everything. What was special, just factually speaking, in Europe, when the Jews were in Europe, even for 1,000 years, there were times, there were good times, but the Jews were never secure because you never knew when the landowner, the landlord, would displace you. You never know when there would be a pogrom. And the Jews were always, it was known, Jews always, if they could live near a river, they would live near a river. Why? Because there was always, in the back of their minds, on the subconscious level, there always has to be a route of escape. Jews always had a reserve of wealth in case they would have to escape. They'd have a certain amount of means to be able to cover their escape. whether it was diamonds, whether it was gold. It's the first time in the history of the Jewish people, we came to the United States, we lived in a land, all those worries were not worries. All we had to worry about was making ends meet. But outside of that, in terms of safety, you were safe. Europe or other lands, the Jews were never safe. The first time, I'm not sure, we have a history major over here. In the history of the world, I don't think the Jews, unless in the time of Solomon, where King Shlomo Melech ruled the world supreme, or David, we were safe. But outside of that, in terms of the government structure, we were never safe, the Jews. United States, even though there was anti-Semitism, but the Jew was safe here in the United States. V'nosati sholom boretz. I will place peace in the land. When there's peace, you don't have to worry. You don't have to tremble. You don't have to worry that your wealth is being plundered. I mentioned the other day that we spoke about in last week's reading, it's mentioned a few times in Torah, Jews not permitted to lend money with interest. Both the lender and the borrower both in violation if they engage in a transaction which there's interest. However, if you lend money to a non-Jew, the laws of interest don't apply. However, rabbinically, the Gemara tells us that rabbinically you're not permitted to. Why? Because if a person becomes a money lender and lends with interest to a non-Jew, ultimately you can lend to a Jew with interest. However, what about if it's a question, this is the way they legislated defense, where a Jew cannot make ends meet. And therefore he has to lend money with interest. So to the Jew, he's not permitted because it's a Torah violation. Does the rabbinic fence apply in that situation? So the Gemara says explicitly that if it's a question of Kedei Chayav, to be able to survive financially, they allowed it. The rabbinic fence doesn't apply. So Rabbeinu Tam says over there, today that we're in Golus, today that we're in exile, with the Jew only has always a short period to remain where he is because he's always displaced after a short while, and you never know when you're going to be displaced. Therefore, a Jew is always in a state of Kedei Chayav. It's always survival. A Jew is always in a survival state, and therefore the laws of ribis, of interest, don't apply regarding lending money to a non-Jew. I'm making this point. There was never that state of mind of peace because you never knew when you're going to be displaced. And that's Nosati Sholem Boretz. I will give peace in the land. God gives peace. It's not, it happens. God gives the peace. And as I say again in Shemona Esrei, we say Sim Shalom. We're asking Hashem to place peace, Sim Shalom. As God says, V'nosati Shalom, it's Sim Shalom. The Cherev Losav Ba'artzachem. The sword will not even pass through your land. So Rashi, again, this is Chazal. Ein tzorch loma shelo yavo milchama. Doesn't say God will protect you from war. Even the sword, what does this mean? Let's say you have a foreign army and they want to ask permission to pass through your territory. Medina. Even that's not going to happen. Of course, you never know when you have a foreign army passing through your land with weapons, you never know what could happen. There may be something which may ignite a dispute and there could be serious consequences. Or when a foreign army passes by, even psychologically, knowing that something could happen, if nothing happens, it puts people on the edge and they feel insecure. You'll be secure to the point you won't even see the foreign army entering into your territory. That's how you be protected. No, the United States has prided themselves that since from a certain point going, we were never attacked. We were never attacked on the United States domestically. We never attacked. The whole story with 9/11 was the first time that we were attacked domestically in the United States. And that really rattled. Not only did they attack us, the source of our security, the location of security, which was the Pentagon, even the Pentagon they attacked to show how vulnerable we are. And that really put us on edge, understanding that nothing's impossible. There's no such thing as you're fully secure. And since then, the whole world is not secure for that reason. One time was unheard of. Hijackings. United States, you felt secure. Whether you traveled, wherever you were, you felt secure. From that time onward, the level of security that you have, whether it's in buildings, whether it's travel, wherever you are, you always have to look over your shoulder and you have to check and profile people to understand who people are, who they're not. Never existed. Hashem allowed a new level of insecurity to enter into our societies, which actually destabilize us, which is exactly what happens when there's no bracha. When there's no bracha, that's what happens. You pursue your enemies. And when you pursue your enemies, they will fall before you with the sword. It doesn't say you will kill them. You will kill them with the sword. They will fall. Here we're talking about friendly fire. They'll fall on their own swords. Rashi says, Ish b'cherev re'ehu. Each of the enemy will fall through the sword of his fellow. Meaning when they're being pursued, they themselves will fall on their own swords. V'rodfu mikem chamisha meyo. 5 of you will pursue 100 of the enemy. Umeya mikem revav yirdofu. Now we'll do the mathematics. 5 will pursue 100, and 100 will pursue 10,000. And again, your enemy will fall before you with their own sword. So that will be through their own friendly fire. They will destroy themselves. So famous Rashi here. 5 will pursue 100, and 100 will pursue 10,000. So Rashi cites the Medrash, v'chikach hu hacheshbon. Mathematically, if you work out the numbers, is that correct calculation? It should say, and 100 of you will pursue 2,000, not 10,000, right? If I pursue 100, so you multiply it by 20, then what do you have? It should be 2,000. Elo. So what's the answer? We always speak about Brova Madras Melech. Sometimes you say that the whole is greater than its parts. You have one individual studies Torah. He has a schus. So we say 5 people have Torah, they're able, that schus will allow them to pursue 100. Meaning the numbers don't mean anything. Because even though the numbers are not even, 5, but what if you have 100 Jews? That representation of Torah, because of its dimension of greatness, surpasses 5. And because it's a different representation of Torah, you're even able to pursue 10,000. This is ein adomu otomos Torah. We're not talking that they study Torah when they're in battle, because the people who are in action, we're speaking b'chuksai telechu. These people themselves are people who are dedicated to Torah, and they toil in Torah. 5 people have that identification, they're able to pursue 100. If you have 100 of those people, the merit in the sum total is so much greater, therefore they're able to pursue 10,000. By Rosh Hashiva, Zechariah Nevarach always used to cite the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim explains, there's a pasuk in Mishlei where Shlomo says that, referring to the Torah, Yikorihim Mipninim. The Torah is more precious than one interpretation than diamonds. That's how precious the Torah. These are the words of Shlomo in Mishlei in Proverbs. David Melech says in Tehillim, Tovli Torah Picha mi alfi zov v'chesef. Special are the words of Torah more than thousands of talents of Tovli Torah Picha mi alfi zov v'chesef. Thousands of pieces of gold and silver. So David equates Torah to thousands of pieces of Torah of silver and gold and silver. And Shlomo Melech compares it to diamonds. It's more precious than diamonds. So the Chofetz Chaim explains that if a person has 1 ounce of gold, whatever the cost is, as many multiples as you have of that, it's just multiples of that original value. If a person has a 1 carat diamond, which is worth so much for that carat, and you have a 10 carat diamond, a 10 carat diamond is worth a lot more than 10 times that 1 carat. Of course, it is a geometric progression, it's different dimension of value. A 10 carat diamond, although per carat, initially, the single carat is worth so much, in multiples, it's worth much more. It's a different dimension of diamond. So the Chofetz Chaim explains that if I only have the words of David, it's worth thousands of talents of gold and silver, but it's multiples of the same. Shlomo's bringing about another aspect of it, that if a person studies one Masechta, one tractate, he has a certain degree of value. You study 2 tractates or 3 tractates. It's not 3 times 1, but it's a different dimension. It's like the diamond, as it gets larger, it's a different dimension of diamond. The person, the Talmud Chacham, if he studies to a greater degree, and he's a greater repository of Torah, he's a different dimension person. This is the Chofetz Chaim. Therefore, Shlomo compares Torah, Yikori Mipninim, it's more precious than diamonds. This is the words of the Chofetz Chaim. This is the understanding. If you have 5 people who toiled in Torah, they pursue 100. What about if you have 100 of such people? It's like the diamond increasing in value. They're pursuing as a group. It's one entity pursuing. When they pursue as an entity, it's a different dimension of group. Being this new dimension of group, therefore they're able to pursue, and that's what he says. You cannot compare a lesser number who do the mitzvah to a greater group who does a mitzvah. Now, so according to, usually we say, if you could do a mitzvah in a smaller group or a larger group, it's better to do it in the group, greater group. Meaning, if you have a shul that has 10 people and you have a shul that has 100 people, and you could daven as well in either group, where's it better to daven? It's better to daven in the group which has 100 people. Why? Because it's based on a pasuk in Nishlei, Barov Am Hadras Melech. Because there's greater glory to the king when you have a greater representation who sing his praises, who serve him. So it seems to be it's because Rov Am Hadras Melech. It's a greater kavod shamayim. It's a greater honor of God. So therefore, it's more honorable for God. But over here, you see, what is that value? What is the value when you do something in greater numbers? It's a different dimension. It's not only because I'm giving greater glory. He was speaking about they're not doing the mitzvah here. They're going to battle. People who study Torah, what is their level of value? You have 5 of the same caliber people, and you have 100 of that same caliber people, and they're pursuing the enemy. The 100, in terms of their innate value, their representation is a different dimension of value. So it's not just Rov Hadras Melech. It's not in this context. They're not just doing God's glory here. It's something of what they are, and they are in terms of their representation. It's different dimension of representation. That's what we're talking about over here. So I asked the question on what the Chofetz Chaim says. He says, Yikori Mipninim, that Torah is even more precious than diamonds. But according to the interpretation of the Chofetz Chaim, it is diamonds. We said this geometric progression, it's a different dimension of value. So in what sense is it greater, it's more precious than diamonds? So what we explained was, if there'd be no market, no interest in buying diamonds, regardless of how precious they may be, if there's no interest, what's the value of a diamond? A diamond has no value. If people had no means to buy diamonds, and people would have no interest in diamonds, what's the value of diamond? The diamond has no value. Its value is only because it determines the society's interest gives it value. The Torah itself, it's unrelated to interest of society. It is innately precious because it's God's wisdom. As a result of that, it's more valuable, it's more precious than diamonds. So in terms of its characteristic, that the more you have geometrically, it increases, it's a different dimension. That's the same as diamonds. But in terms of its preciousness, it's more precious because this is not dependent on anything other than itself. And anything, any commodity, its value is dependent on what? On an external interest. And if not that interest, it has no innate value. That's how we explained it. Years ago, my Rashiv Zecharin V'rocha told me something in the name of Rav Yitzchak Panovich. There was a person, his name was Rav Yitzchak Rabinowitz, and he was the Rav of Panovich before the Panovich Rav came to Panovich. And Rav Chaim Brisket said that in his life he never met such a genius like Rav. He was known Itzel Yitzchak. He never met a person with the dimension of genius of Rav Itzel Panovich, Rav Yitzchak Rabinowitz. That was his name. And Rav Chaim was one of a kind of a genius. Read about Rav Chaim Brisket's genius is not to be fathomed. And he himself said on Rav Itzel Panovich that he never met such a genius. So my Rishiv told me in the name of Rav Itzel Panovich, he used to say, you have a person who's a Talmud Chacham, has tremendous amount of Torah knowledge, and he doesn't have a position. He's not a rabbi, he's not a rav, he has no level of recognition in terms of who he is. But he is a person who knows that he's a trove of Torah knowledge. And he's a real, what we call Talmud Chacham. He used to say that in itself, that is its value. That he possesses what's infinitely precious, that it gives him value. The position, that's what you're doing. But in terms of who are you, what are you, it's what you possess. And if a person possesses Torah, that is your innate value. So even when you're in a position where you could disseminate it, but what is your value? Your value is what you possess. So this is you cannot compare when you're a smaller number who do the mitzvah, which which they did. Because right now we're talking about they're in the state of battle. Ufanisi aleichem, and I will turn to you, v'freisi eschem, and I will make you to be fruitful, from the word of pre. V'beisi eschem, and I will increase you, v'akimosis brisi etchem, and I will establish my covenant with you, uphold the covenant. Now, we know that God can do infinitely multiple things at one time. If God says that although I maintain and will all existence simultaneously, but God says, if you follow my statutes and you do this or whatever you do, I will turn to you, meaning my focus will only be you. What does that mean? That means everything else that exists is only you. Mean everything is connected to the Jewish people. For Anisi Aleichem, I'll bring it out to clarify. Efne mikol asokai. I will remove myself from all my other levels of involvement, l'shalim scharchem, to pay your reward, to pay your due reward. Moshlom adavadom elamelech shesocha poalim. Now we find in Dvarim that in one pasuk, the word Bnei Yisrael is mentioned 5 times. Why is it mentioned 5 times? So Midrash tells us that if a person loves his child and he refers to him, he doesn't refer to him by pronouns. He speaks out, he says, his name's Chaim. He says, Chaim did this. It says, and he did that. Whenever he said he refers to his son, it's by name. Why? Because whenever a father who loves his son mentions the name of the son, it evokes a level of love to the father. So he always refers to his son as by name, because the name is an expression of love that he has for his child. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu mentions Bnei Yisrael, and we know how careful the Torah is not to use extra words. And it repeats Bnei Yisrael one pasuk 5 times. What does that say? That's a statement of Hashem's love for Klal Yisrael. He refers to this repeatedly in one pasuk 5 times Bnei Yisrael. So Rashi says in that pasuk, why does he mention 5 times? It's Keneged Chamishu Chumshei Torah. It corresponds to the 5 Chumashim, the 5 books of the Torah. What does that mean? He mentioned 5 times because the 5 books of Torah, 5, therefore he mentions 5 times. What it means is, what is the value, what is so special of the Jewish people? Because we, the people who have the Torah, we accepted the Torah. So the Torah is revealing why is the Jew so loved and so special to Hashem? Because we accepted the Torah. And what is the Torah? The Torah's 5 books. That's why it's mentioned 5 times. That's the basis why there's the special love that he has for us that he has for no one else. Now, we say, if not for Torah, the world wouldn't exist. And as I mentioned him in the Brisker Rav the other day, at the end of time, when God will announce to the world that whoever has a share of Torah, they should come take their rightful share, every nation comes and they claim they have a share in Torah. And this is the end of time, the moment of truth. Whether it's the Romans, the Persians, the Medes, every one of them. And Hashem says, what is your contribution? We amassed wealth, we went to wars, we built markets, we built aqueducts. Hashem says, you did it for yourselves. But what's even the consideration? Because they realized that the only reason at the moment of truth that Bereshis bara Elokim, that anything at the time of creation in terms of its profile and its infrastructure, it cannot happen unless it's somehow related to the Jews studying Torah. There's some connection. So every aspect of that God wills in existence, it's all because the Jews study Torah. It's somehow connected to that. That's a finisi aleichem. I will turn to you, Rashi says, Efna mikol hasokai. I will remove myself from everything else. You are the focus, meaning you being the focus mean who you are, that itself will manifest itself in the way existence functions. Whether existence rises or falls, that's dependent on you. So if you're seen in that special light and that special status, because you're behaving and acting and living according to what Hashem wants, everything in the world will advance. And that's the meaning, Mikol HaSokai. Every aspect of the world will be directly affected, impacted by you in the most positive way. So it's the equivalent of God removes from everything else, only focusing on you, because you will be the determining factor in terms of the whole world, in the positive sense.